to you Mr. Professor Avi Loeb. Welcome, Mr.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks to accept. Alors, thank you. We're in province of Quebec, Canada. We talk a little bit about what is all going on right now with the three atlas. In my news show, I'm always inform people about the sun, the space, our neighborhood, space neighborhood. I'm very interested myself in that. So, uh, July 1st, we saw a strange object entering our solar system. And immediately I thought, oh, it's not normal. Like it was 2017 with Oumuamua, and I will begin with that. 2017, and I was so pleased you wrote something about that, about your theory. Let's just do a small recap about Oumuamua, the strange object that changed its course and accelerated without a warning, non-gravitational acceleration, and also, oh, it changed its orbit. Nothing normal about this object. So, about just a small recap about your news about Oumuamua, and do we still have some news about it?
Yeah, so Oumuamua was the first object from outside the solar system that was discovered by a telescope in Hawaii on October 19th, 2017. And it was flagged as a near-Earth object, and then the astronomers realized that it's actually from outside the solar system because it was moving too fast to be bound by gravity to the sun, and therefore it was the first interstellar object. At first, astronomers said it must be a comet, but there was no gas or dust around it that are the indicators of a comet. So then they said, well, it must be a rock. But in fact, the brightness of the object changed by a factor of 10 as it was tumbling every 8 hours. And that meant the object has a very extreme shape. It's at least 10 times longer than it is wide, and even in projections. So the analysis of the brightness variations imply that it's most likely flat, like a pancake. And in addition, it showed non-gravitational acceleration. As you mentioned, something was pushing it away from the sun without any indication for the rocket effect that usually results from the evaporation of gas in comets. So I suggested that it may be that the sunlight that is pushing it, and for that the object had to be relatively thin. And nature doesn't make such objects, so I suggested maybe it's technological. We cannot get additional data on it because after a few months, it was too faint for us to detect it. And since then, we haven't gotten any data. And that was unfortunate that the astronomy community did not really engage in a massive campaign to get as much data as possible, because the astronomers assumed that it's just like the rocks we have in the solar system. And then we learned, I hope that we learned the lesson, because as of now, we have 3I Atlas, an object discovered on July 1st, 2025, this year. And it's the third one. In between the two, there was a comet that looked just like a typical comet. But 3I Atlas is the third object that was discovered by the Atlas telescope. And that's a 0.5 meter telescope. It's not a big one. And this object was extremely bright. It was discovered at a distance of nearly 5 times the Earth-Sun separation. And therefore, it must be a big object. And the lower limit on its diameter is about 5 kilometers. And that's the size of a big city. So it's a big object, 1 million times more massive than Oumuamua. And so the first question that arises is, why is this object 1 million times more massive? It's just the third object, and there should have been 1 million Oumuamuas discovered before this one. But it's quite surprising that it arrived to the inner solar system. I calculated that, in fact, there is not enough material in interstellar space to deliver such a big package to our backyard in a decade. We should have expected it to arrive once per 10,000 years or more. So that's the first unusual fact about it. But then it also is moving in the plane of the planets around the sun.
Yeah.
And that's very surprising. The chance of that happening at random is 1 in 500. So again, a very small probability. but it's the third object that we found. And then there are all kinds of other anomalies. Altogether, there are 9 anomalies that I
Yeah.
can mention in detail.
Yeah, so many. But about Oumuamua, am I correct asserting that the object was traveling like that, 8-hour rotation, and maybe that could be like like a sphere in the center and massive weight on it, or propulsion, and then because if you throw something, it will go longer, long last. But also the second question, I remember after the Oumuamua passed, there was a kind of little panic I saw in the astronomical world about what was this subject, and they had a project to build a probe to run after him. Do you have some news about that?
Yeah, so indeed, this was a wake-up call for us to think about an interceptor. And the European Space Agency has what they call a comet interceptor, a concept for that. But that particular spacecraft will not be able to chase an interstellar object because it can only boost its motion by 2 kilometers per second, very low speed. And for example, 3I Atlas was moving at 60 kilometers per second relative to the sun when it entered the solar system. So it would make sense to try and intercept the path. In the case of 3I Atlas, it was possible to do it if a spacecraft around Jupiter had all the fuel that it started with. This spacecraft is called Juno, and I published a scientific paper showing that if it used the initial fuel that it started with, it had enough time to get to the path of 3I Atlas by the time that it passes near Jupiter on March 16th, 2026. But unfortunately, there is not enough fuel there, and they won't be able to do it. However, it demonstrates that if we have an advanced warning, sufficiently early warning of an interstellar object coming along, and we have some interceptors that we put in space, we can move them so that they meet the object at the right time, at the right place. And that's extremely important because then we can get a close-up photograph and maybe even land on such an object so we can bring some materials back. And obviously, if we get a close-up photograph, we will be able to tell what the object is like. Is it a rock or is it a spacecraft? The unfortunate thing about Oumuamua is we don't know the exact shape of it. We just know that the amount of sunlight reflected from it changed by a factor of 10 as it was tumbling. And even if you imagine a very thin object like a piece of paper, when you look at it in projection, variation by a factor of 10 in the surface area of the piece of paper requires a very good alignment with your line of sight as to the narrow, because otherwise you would get variations of order unit if you just look at it at some typical angles. So we don't have a clue about the exact shape of Oumuamua. In principle, I calculated for 3I Atlas, it's passing within a distance of about 50 million kilometers from the orbit of the Earth around the sun. But the Earth actually, when it came closest to us, to that orbit, the Earth was on the opposite side. So if we happen to be 6 months earlier, then we could have observed it with a radar system. We have radar systems that involve a radio telescope, and I calculated that we could have imaged 3I Atlas because it's very big, of order 5 kilometers or more. Unfortunately, when it came closest to the sun on October 29th, the Earth was on the opposite side, and so we couldn't really get close to it. The closest it will come to Earth will be on December 19th. Yeah, go ahead.
And about that's the thing. Many people, there's a silent shot around this object, abnormal. I remember, and I was pleased to see through your website, Medium. I will share the link. You shared this picture, and I told my people this is the Schumacher Comet Levi.
Right.
Okay. In 1994, I was watching it live on TV. It was prepared for many weeks, everyone on the earth could see that. But now it's almost impossible to have the correct data because of the so-called shutdown. How convenient is it for them? But we don't have, even from the GPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and others, nothing, no data.
This is
this is abnormal.
Yeah, this is very unfortunate because it's an opportunity for NASA, for example, to demonstrate that they pursue frontier science and therefore they should receive funding in the future. But instead, they use the government shutdown as an excuse for not communicating the best image that we have. That was taken by the high-rise camera on board the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter.
Yes.
When 3i Atlas came closest to Mars on October 3rd, just a month ago. And unfortunately, that data was never released. And I tried to approach the principal investigator of that camera, the high-rise camera, and I didn't get a reply. And a few days ago, Congresswoman Paulina Luna submitted a letter to the head of NASA, the acting administrator, Sean Duffy, asking NASA to release those images. We haven't heard back. Last week, Sean Duffy responded to a tweet from Kim Kardashian. But I would have liked him to respond to an appeal from scientists, a scientist like myself, or Congresswoman Paulina Luna. And unfortunately, we haven't received any response. And I think NASA should give a higher priority to avoiding any sabotage of scientific data by politics. They should give a higher priority to disseminate the data they have with scientists. And unfortunately, that's not at the top of their agenda. It's more important to respond to a media influencer like Kim Kardashian than to respond
or even to invite Neil deGrasse, who is not a scientific like you, is a commentator, and others. So I prefer looking at talking to real scientists who know the things. But also my kind of next question, because in this text, very important, you mentioned something. You remind people that there were 5 mass extinction events on Earth, and probably many caused by either comets and or asteroids or both, whatever. But it should be a concern. And again, we don't have the current data, live data about it. All we have is even that I'm linked to many YouTube channels and trying to show people, but we still don't the real lifetime data. It's not sure we have them at first, but we're not even sure the orbit or direction change behind the sun. And yes, it changed. I showed in the earlier today. I don't know if you saw it, but it's the 3rd time there's massive solar eruptions in the directions of this subject.
That's very interesting. One thing we know over the past few days is that there were some solar observatories that gave the data on 3i Atlas when it came close to the sun, and it looks like it became very bright, much more rapidly than any previous comet. And in addition, it became bluer than the sun. And I calculated that the non-gravitational acceleration that was reported on just a few days ago implies that the object lost about 1/6 of its mass. And that means more than 5 billion tons should have been evaporated in order to give it this non-gravitational acceleration that was reported, if it is a natural comet. And that should be very easy for us to see in the coming weeks. Once it gets out of the direction of the sun, observatories around the Earth could see it. And my guess is that, if it is a natural comet, it should be extremely bright. There should be a large cloud of debris around it that represents a substantial fraction of its mass. So if that turns out to be the case, and we can infer the composition of the object, then it would definitely show that it's natural, because it's a significant fraction of the mass that was lost. However, if the propulsion was not a result of cometary evaporation, then we won't see this very big cloud, massive cloud of gas. And in that case, we should then consider alternatives.
Yeah, and there were the anti-tail, the counter-tail, that was totally abnormal. And you talk about the probability of this object, but right now in the Earth area, there's 4 comets. When was the last time we had 4 comets? Swan, we don't talk much about Swan. It's near the Earth. We should have many telescopes looking at it. 227 telescopes and instruments were used in the world. Strangely, we don't have a clue. So there's something else. And do you you're in contact with many people on the scientific community, but they don't talk much about it.
Yeah, that's one strange fact about the scientific community. The assumption is we should assume that it's a comet, even if it behaves differently than comets in the solar system, and therefore, we just accept whatever we get about it. And for example, the trajectory that is aligned with the plane of the planets, that it's impossible to deny that. And why would we have such a highly unlikely event? The size of the object, again, makes it extremely unlikely. So it's possible that we're talking about a rare comet. My point is, now we're getting to the next few weeks where we should see a huge amount of gas, 5 billion tons of a gas cloud, very massive, in case it's a comet, because we know that it accelerated close to the sun. Alternatively, if it's technological and the acceleration had to do with some propulsion system, then we shouldn't necessarily expect a massive cloud of gas around it. So it's possible to test one way or another rather than show any prejudice. And anyway, it doesn't really make sense to hide information, because anyone around the globe in the coming weeks will be able, to buy online a telescope bigger than 0.5 meter in diameter and see it. So it's impossible to suppress the information. We are not in the days of Galileo Galilei, where he was the only one looking at Jupiter through his telescope. Nowadays, a lot of people have, and already, as you said, the 227 observatories did that. So, and in addition, the International Asteroid Warning Network decided to have a campaign between November 27th and January 27th, where a lot of observations will be coordinated. So I'm quite confident that there will be a lot of data. And that was the message I sent to the United Nations, which basically endorses this organization. And I encourage them to coordinate as much observations as possible, because if there are additional anomalies, if this object behaves in strange ways, we will not miss them. If, on the other hand, it turns out to be a natural comet, so be it, but at least we checked, And my point is, it's like a black swan event where you could have a very small probability for something being alien technology, but you must consider it seriously, because if it is, then the implications for humanity are huge. And so that's something the scientists are not used to. When something has a low probability, they completely ignore it. But you can't do that when there are implications to society. You have to consider even low probability events in order to protect humanity from some devastating effect.
Yeah, and if it sounds like a thing, it looks like a thing, it acts like a thing, well, maybe that's a logical explanation, is artificial purpose engine. And again, even the Congresswoman Anna Paulina didn't receive an answer.
No,
she asked her for she asked formally. It's a formal request.
Yeah, in fact, that was on Friday, and I communicated with her, and today she even tweeted the letter again. And my hope is that the acting administrator Sean Duffy will respond, because it makes very little sense for the reputation of NASA to have a response to Kim Kardashian and not to Congresswoman Luna, or to scientists like myself. And it doesn't cost any money. It's not a big effort. They have the data. They just have to say, okay, let's share it electronically with the scientific community. They don't even need to do any press release or anything. It's just a matter of just showing the images. And they did that so many times. It's not a big effort, and in fact, by law, they are supposed to do it within a day and a half if we were not under government shutdown. So the only reason for this not to happen, in my view, is some politics that have to do with the fact that they don't want to operate it to do it because of the shutdown, to show the world that NASA is valuable maybe and not providing the information when it's needed. But I think it acts the other way. It actually takes away credibility from NASA in the public's eyes.
But in France and Mexico and other places around the world, they still have their telescope, their instruments. Some of them took pictures also. But we don't see them either. So it's not NASA. It's not only NASA thing. Do you have contacts in other countries? Are they Russia, China, even China? It seemed there was something coming from China. Again, we're not sure. Is it reliable or not?
Yeah, so there are other orbiters of Mars that presumably were operating when 3I Atlas came close, but they may not have good enough instruments to report useful data, and that's most likely the reason why they haven't shared it. However, HiRISE definitely was looking at 3I Atlas. It has high quality data, and I heard from behind the scenes that the data exists. It's just not being shared, which I find to be inappropriate given the circumstances, because it's time sensitive. We need to see the data before it's too late, because we are planning future observations, and the more we know about the object, the better is our planning. And so it actually hurts science if you don't release this data in time, if you just wait a few months, because by then we will not have the opportunity to observe 3I Atlas as we will in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and another question, maybe you are aware or you know it or not, I don't know, but about the Space Force. It's a strange entity, parallel to NASA, military one, of course. Space Force, we heard nothing either with them, but my guess is they know something about it too. This is a possibility. Does someone contacted you? From
not
the
from,
Space
not
Force?
from the Space Force. I had contacts with the US Space Command before about a meteor that came from interstellar space back in 2014. They actually drafted the letter confirming that the conclusion that I reached with my student, that this meteor was moving very fast and therefore was interstellar. They confirmed it at the 99.99% in an official letter to NASA. So that was very helpful. I think they're mostly engaged with national security issues, but, and they don't have necessarily an agenda on scientific matters. It's really NASA that is funded by the public and is pursuing science. And HiRISE, this camera was operating around Mars. I mean, only for scientific purposes. There was no other political narrative to it. So holding it hostage to the politics of the day is inappropriate. And I very much hope that in the coming days we'll see the data because of the letter from Representative Luna.
Yeah, very interesting to see. And to complete this interview, I know you're busy. Was the wow signal emitted from 3I Atlas? Very interesting theory. And also, Oumuamua, does it came also from this area?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. And in fact, I should say that these essays that you are showing on the screen, they are all part of my postings on medium.com. So if you just look for Avi Loeb at medium.com, you can find a posting every day or two, and sometimes two a day. I basically provide updates, scientific updates. And in this particular one, I noticed, that was a few weeks ago, I noticed that the direction of arrival of 3I Atlas coincides to within 9 degrees from the direction of the wow signal, a radio signal that was definitely extraterrestrial, but the source is unknown, and the source was moving towards the sun. And 9 degrees separation, the chance of that happening at random is of the order of 0.6%. So it's very unlikely. And that's one of the anomalies. And I asked radio observers to monitor 3 Atlas to check if there is any radio transmission. I also calculated that in 1977, when this signal was detected, 3 Atlas was at a distance of 600 times the Earth-Sun separation. So back then, in order to generate this signal, 3 Atlas had to transmit about 1 gigawatt of power, which is roughly the power of a nuclear reactor that we have on Earth. It's completely feasible. And the question is, was it really transmitting a signal? Maybe someone was communicating with it, because we saw it from not exactly the same direction. But at any event, I got the confirmation last week that the radio observers are monitoring it, and hopefully we'll know if they detect anything from it. There is also the radio antenna on the Juno spacecraft around Jupiter that will be used in March 2026 to search for any radio transmission.
So yes, we have so many questions. We don't have the data. People are asking me, did the comet broke the other side of the sun? It seemed not. And again, we don't have the correct data telling us if it changed course.
Well, we know that it exhibited non-gravitational acceleration, so it definitely changed course. The question is, was it a result of cometary evaporation? In which case, there should be a very massive cloud of gas around it that represents about a sixth of its mass. And so that should become obvious as soon as we observe it in the coming weeks, once it goes sufficiently away from the sun. So by the middle of November, we should see it from Earth-based observatories without a problem.
Thank you very much for all your answers, and we will continue to follow you on every platform we can. We will share, of course, the information we can have, and of course, for our subscribers, this interview will be extracted from the show and available for all. Thank you very much for your time, Professor. Pleasure to meet you.
Thanks for having me. It was a great pleasure. Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye.